Now, the reason for beginning now on the reasonings is so that you can reflect on them. And they'll be in the background and come to the foreground, background, foreground, like that over the next month. We don't want to cram them in at the end, because these reasonings, if you think of them as food for thought, as stimulation to challenge the external world, that may be helpful. Challenge that there is an external world. It's usually said in Gelupa circles that a Sangha's teaching is not so dangerous, but the Prasangika teaching is, because it undermines objects even more. However, some very bright monk in Dharamsala, whose opinion was that mind only was much more dangerous, and even physically dangerous. Okay. It was difficult for me this morning when I was reading this. We're in Reflections in Reality, which is page 402, I guess. So, I think the first part on the path. Did we ever read the section on the 3 types of beings? We probably didn't. Yeah. We stopped before that. So this does refer back to that. And I felt in reading it, it was too bad that we hadn't read that. It's one of the more lively, not one of the liveliest parts of Reflections on Reality. But we'll get there, hopefully. Beings of small, middling, and great capacity, and what they have to in this typology of religious persons. But we'll do that. We'll try to get to it anyway. So now, some people think that what's being refuted is that the name is the object, or the object is the name. And so it has to be, that's why I've pointed out I hope very clearly, that that's not what one is refuting. Although when you look at the reasoning, and it's uninterpreted form, you could think that.
One thing that
yes,
I noticed, or that struck me, is on page, notice it's 411, is where you summarize what
yes,
the arguments are trying to do.
yes.
The way it starts off, saying to repeat, none of these consequences is that if objects are established by way of their own character. That, to me, seemed a little bit disconnected for some reason.
Not knowing what the consequences are.
Well,
right?
Talk about it.
I think maybe it's because you're starting off, you've just talked about about the consequences, but I think it's because because it's immediately a negative statement of these consequences, rather than saying the point is.
Yes. The point is not that if objects were established.
Right.
Even if it's negative, it's much clearer.
Yeah. It just, at first I couldn't figure out what was going on there.
Good. Yes.
Who is positing that things exist
or established by way of their own character as reference of conceptual consciousness.
It is claimed that the Vaibhashikas and Sautrantikas and well, I guess all non-Buddhists.
But not the Cittamātra. They don't, because obviously
Right.
they don't.
Yeah.
But Dzongpa is using that reasoning to establish the ultimate existence of other power natures, isn't he? In the last chapter. Does he use
Objects, other power natures are established by way of their own character. And therefore they ultimately exist.
Okay.
But they're not established by way of their own character as the... It was interesting to have this phraseology of as the bases of a fixing of names, rather than just saying reference. I thought the difference of my old translation was...
Means the same thing.
Yeah. But they're not established by way of their own character that way.
So how are they established? Do we get to that?
You still want to know what established by way of their own character means?
Yeah.
Now, I think you get a view of, you get a good understanding of at least the problem.
Whose problem is it? Who's positing it? Oh, just the non-Buddhists are positing it. Okay.
No, what?
Who's positing that established by own character?
That
Referent of conceptual
consciousnesses? Yeah, the lower school.
And isn't it too what you're saying here, that it's not more than just any system positing it, is that it's our innate?
Yes,
It's innate.
it's our innate misconception. And that is the root of even the final root of cyclic existence. It is the final root also of all of the obstructions to omniscience. And then, how do you prove that lower systems do assert this? You know, especially ones that follow Tignaga and Dhammakirti. That's hard. You know, negative proofs are that a Sangha is speaking to them. And that's clear. He doesn't, I mean, he uses low vehicle scriptures to make his point. He doesn't use great vehicle scriptures. And it's a very subtle point because they can't make a difference between established by way of its own character and established by way of its own character as the referent of terms. And we can't make the distinction. So they never say established by way of its own character as the referent of terms and thoughts. They never say.
What about Jitsen?
What about them?
Generally characterized phenomena. Isn't that in that area? Established means of its own character as the reference of conceptual consciousness.
I'm going to force you to speak clearly. I know what you mean, but I'm going to force you to speak clearly.
Well,
not force you. I'm going to sit here and wait till hell freezes over.
well, the Sautrantika assert Ronsen as the ultimate truth, Ronsen being own character, specifically characterized phenomena.
Impermanent phenomena.
And Jitsen, or generally characterized phenomena, as the relative truth, the conventional truth, which are generally characterized because they are terms. I mean, term generalities meaning.
Uncombined space is a term.
Uncombined space is the reference to it would be. I'm not sure. Uncombined. You always bring that up.
Read Xuanzang. You see, that's another one. the handling of uncompounded space. That's another topic in Shuanzang. But anyway, what she was meaning to say is that in the Sautrantika school, for instance, even they hold that generally characterized phenomena are not established by way of their own character. Therefore, how could they hold that they're established by way of their own character as the reference of conceptions, of our thoughts, and of our terms? Or at least that's a good thing that she might have been. Would have been a good query. Among many good queries.
Generally characterized phenomena are conceptions?
No. They exist, they are phenomena, they are not established by way of their own character, but they are merely imputed by conceptuality. But that doesn't mean conception should, if you take the word conception, dokpa, something like that, you got to put it on the side of the subject. Are they just turnji? No. But they don't have their own character that can appear to a directly perceiving consciousness. Their own uncommon attributes, their own uncommon qualities that can appear to a consciousness of direct perception.
Because they're imputed from the subject side.
Yes. They do exist, but they don't exist by way of their own character. So how could it be said that the Sutra school holds that uncompounded space and so forth exist by way of their own character as the reference of conceptuality and of terms? Because you see, exists by way of its own character should be, what do you say? Existing by way of its own character as the reference of conceptual thought and terms should be contained within existing by way of its own character.
Right.
Therefore, the distinction often, always is made, it's not the usual Rangitsaniki Truba that we're talking about. And the Sutra school doesn't say that in so many words, but that's their meaning. When the Cittamātrans look at what they're asserting, that's what they come to mean. That's the difference between Kelangbare and Kelang Songware. You see, Kelang means assert. Kelang Song means you've come to assert. You're not saying it, but Kelang Song. And it's how. Now, so then they have various ways of handling this, of switching to other vocabulary than Rangitsaniki Truba, so slightly softer meanings within the Sutra school's own system, in order to accommodate how the Cittamātrans look at them. Just as Prasangika views Cittamātra as claiming that everything exists from its own side. Thus, they have to say that uncompounded space in the mind-only system exists from its own side, right? Which is an unthinkable thing for the Cittamātrans to say. They never say it. Or, to put the matter more bluntly, with more force, being the referent of the term juice exists. It's a yugunda, right? An existent imputational nature. Being the referent of the term juice exists. This juice is, this fluid is the referent of Jeffrey's juice. If I put it over there and say, would you mind passing me my juice? You'd know, right? Otherwise, you'd pass me your tape recorder or something, you know, or you wouldn't even know what pass meant. Would never communicate at all. But to say that in the mind-only school, as Tsongkhapa does, they assert that this is established from its own side, or its being the referent of the term Jeffrey's juice is established from its own side, you know, it's just totally vitiates the meaning. You know, like what's the difference between Rangone Truba and Rangitsenjige Truba, right? So you see, it's a very subtle point that's brought over from another school. And I think it does vitiate the, shall we say, the liberative thrust of the mind-only school, to be constantly saying, oh yes, these existent imputational natures do exist from their own side. It just vitiates it. And is there only to show what Chandrakirti, in his great cleverness, was finding fault with. In other words, he saw that the Cittamatrans must be able to find something among its bases of designation. You must be able to find, you know, you must be able to say that with regard to uncompounded space, the space in the north, the space in the east, you know, that these are the basis of designation of space, and they are space. This collection is space. That's all existent from its own side means. You can say that this collection of parts is the article. I mean, don't you want to say that the collection of the parts of the table is the table? There's no substantially existent table separate from this, but the collection is. And can't you feel that if you said the collection is not the table, you could posit table wherever you wanted. That's how the Cittamatrans look on the Prasangikas, and how we should too. Unless we, you know, oh, I've imbued the Prasangika view, you know? I mean, you have to see how startlingly nihilistic it appears, or is.
But for Cittamātra, isn't even the ultimate uncompounded?
The ultimate's uncompounded, but the ultimate being the final mode of subsistence of objects is considered to be ultimately established.
That's what.
Beyond being Rangone Truba, it's Rangitsenjige Truba, Tuntami Truba.
That's why the Satranika is so clear to me, because the non-affirming negative is so clearly, or it seems logical that it's merely imputed. And how does Tsongkhapa rescue that in terms of the ultimate, that it's something?
Yeah, I thought I saw one place in the sutra where it was, Sutra Unraveling the Thought, where it was suggested that thoroughly established natures are existent by way of their own character. I mean, the sutra definitely says that imputational natures are merely imputed by conceptuality. It says that other powered natures subsist by way of their own character, which eliminates that, you know, those two cancel each other, you know, the two identifications. Even if he didn't say the second one, the first one isn't the quality, well, the first one isn't established, well, he did say, the first one isn't established by way of its own character. But he didn't say the second one is not merely conceptually imputed. But from the run of it, you can understand that. The third one, you could say, he doesn't say either about, and thus you might want to say what he wants to be, say it's inexpressible. You can't say it's imputed by thought, you can't say it's existent by way of its own character. That would be the other choice. If you have only two choices, imputedly existent and existent by way of its own character, then it's got to exist by way of its own character because it's the truth.
Right, it's the final nature.
And this can be seen directly in meditative equipoise. So I was positing, did I undermine my own presentation of what Rangitsinike means? I did. I think I relayed to you when I was going somewhere that I suddenly understood how my own presentation of it is totally destroyed.
In terms of the discussion of the collection? Or
No, my discussion, not on what we've said, but was that, well, we have to have a quality, in explaining Rangitsinike Trupa, we have to have something that Shenwang can be and Yongdrup can be, right? If you're gonna figure out what the meaning is. And Kinsuyeshi Tupten had this very weak, but aesthetically delightful, once you know what's going on, statement that, that other powered natures are established by their own character means that they are produced from cause and conditions. Gee, his is as bad as mine. And this is just the same fault as mine.
how
And
is that the same? Because if it,
no, because why would Prasangikas refute them if that's the meaning of Rangitsinike Trupa? If the meaning of Rangitsinike Trupa with respect to other powered natures is that other powered natures are produced from causes and conditions, then the Madhyamaka would have no reason to refute them. And if the meaning of Rangitsinike Trupa with respect to thoroughly established natures is that they exist, or whatever, they are the final mode of subsistence of things, then the Madhyamakas will have no reason to refute them. My version was, I was trying to find something that, I thought, because it had a split meaning to it, was particularly weak, and I didn't see the just general unbridgeable fault. Now, my version was that, I'm just going through another version of mine. The meaning of Rangitsinike Trupa is established as an appearing object of direct perception, because all other powered natures are, and all thoroughly established natures are also. Now that is a common meaning, and it's an important shift from Sautrantika to Cittamātra. But then again, why would Prasangikas refute this? So you might, to Kinsuyeshi Tupten's add in Ranguni Trupa Kanshik. Kanshik means number one, Ranguni Trupa, right? And then he can say Yugyen Trupa and Shiluksu Trupa. And the other one for Shenwang, right, is Yugyen Skyepa, or Yugyen Zhong, either way. Or Yugyen Shenle Zhong, but okay, Yugyen Zhong. So the meaning of Rangitsinike Trupa for other powered natures is Rangani Trupa Kanshik Yugyen Zhong. Maybe, we can explore this again. And for all sorts of things are running through my mind. For thoroughly established natures, it's Ranguni Trupa and Ranguni Trupa Kanshik, Shiluksu Trupa. So the second part wouldn't be, well, what is refuted? And then you'd have to, do you follow? Then you have to say, do you have to say then that the meaning of Rangitsinike Trupa is Ranganitruva. But you can't say that for within Cittamātra itself. If you're going to claim that Cittamatrans hold that Yugunda are Ranganitruva, and that this is a lesser status of existence than Rangitsenikitruva. You with me? It's got to be a lesser status. Even if the Prasangikas view Ranganitruva and Rangitsenikitruva as the same. All right? You know, what are you going to put instead of Ranganitruva? You know, you're almost forced back to saying, oh, what does Rangitsenikitruva mean with respect to other power natures? It means Rangitsenikitruva kanshe yugenajon. Of using the term itself, because you can't find any meaning for it. Oh. So, this, you see, when you press issues far enough, so mine isn't any good either. So the more circular ones, what does Rangitsenikitruva mean? It means Yerba Kanshi, Dope Taksam du Matruva. It exists, and it's not merely imputed by conceptuality. That's what Rangitsenikitruva means. And what does Dope Taksam du Yerba mean? It means Yerba Kanshi. And you can guess what I'm going to say? Rangitsenikitruva. The circular. Now, there are more interesting, it's sort of thing people boil down to in the debating courtyard. But, and it shows the flimsiness of this edifice that Tsongkhapa was trying to build, of where Cittamātra said to propound that all phenomena exist from their own side. And I think also that since it vitiates Cittamātra of its prime meaning, when you have to say that an object's being the referent of a term exists from its own side, you know, it's like, well, let's give up and go home. We can't understand what they're talking about. So, just one thing we could do, we're going to have just a few minutes to talk about the reasoning. For next time, in Absorption in No External World, please read 54 to 83, and then for the next time after that, read 83, just in case you want to, you get so involved in this, you want to race on. 83 to 123, because that's a sort of a bigger chunk.
Does that deal with in there why Kunda have to be Ranganitruva? We discussed that, and I remember not understanding that.
Well, why they have to be Ranganitruva is that if Cittamatrans understood that uncompounded space is not established from its own side, then when you take Aryadeva's dictum, that if you understand the emptiness of one phenomenon, which means to understand, this is in Madhyamaka, right? That if you understand that one phenomenon is empty of being established from its own side, then you can understand that all phenomena are.
when he uses that vocabulary, in that.
No, he doesn't use that vocabulary. He just says, if you understand the emptiness of one phenomenon, you can understand the emptiness of all phenomena. So, this is Arya Davis, 400. And what that's taken to mean is not direct perception of emptiness, but inferential, even inferential, what Gelugpa scholars take, well, quite sensibly, that if you can penetrate truly to an object's in the prasangika mode of not existing from its own side, then you can switch to any other topic as long as that consciousness remains active, functional, and you'll immediately understand its not being established from its own side, right? Without any further reasoning. That's the bedrock that forces this distinction into Cittamātra. They can understand that existent imputational natures are not established by way of their own character, but if they understood established by way of its own character as meaning not existent from their own side, then they'd understand something is not existent from its own side. You with me? And if they can understand something that's not existent from their own side, then they can understand everything that's not existent from its own side. Thus, it's forced on them that since Chandrakirti argued with them, that they must sort of secretly, you see, or even not secretly, but not known to themselves, are holding that unconfounded space, or more importantly, being the referent of a term, is established from its own side.
That seems like something, though, that would only apply to a system where all phenomena had the same status of emptiness. Whereas in Cittamātra, it doesn't.
But it does.
It does.
Well, I don't know.
Oh, I see.
But their version of emptiness. Therefore, Rangitsanyaki-truba in Cittamātra can't be the Rangitsanyaki-truba that Prasangikas refute as meaning the same as Rangvane-truba. You've got to have two statuses of existence for Prasangika to make sense. The other daring thing is that they don't make sense, or that they're cutting the pie in an entirely different way, you see? They're using different terminology to say the same thing. Do you follow? That it would be more appropriate to talk about objects not being established by way of their own side, although Chandrakirti is always talking about not being established by way of their own character, all right? Tsongkhapa has to flip this, you know, in order so that you can understand the lower schools. He says, well, this is something really subtle, more subtle than what the lower schools can refute with respect to anything. Okay? But another way you could look at it, would be that, like Chandrakirti is, you know, he's thinking, oh, this thing about Rangitsanyaki-truba that the Sandhya-Vimochana Sutra says twice, and then he highlights. There's no question he highlights. He doesn't highlight it when, he highlights it in his own Madhyamaka. He says, whatever is produced by way of its own character, well, you know, there's no possibility. Would have to always be existent or never. Oh, I don't know what he says, I forget. Whatever exists by way of its own character could never be produced. So you see, this vocabulary, maybe that this vocabulary was his window to reality, denying Rangitsanyaki-truba. Whereas the window to reality of all phenomena, and the window to reality for the Sandhya-Vimochana Sutra, Sangha, and so forth, is that being the referent of language and conceptions, conceptual minds, thought, is just something made up by language. And it gives us a sense of a difference of entity of subject and object, because the subject is the namer and the object is the named. And that's the window to reality. And you just don't want people to fall to an extreme of nihilism, so you say, you know, whatever. It's not just say, all the power of natures exist by their own character, and, you know, and argue with the way somebody else cuts the pie. Don't do it that way. And to try to amalgamate the systems too much, I would say certainly causes you to miss the liberative import. But it's also an amusing game to play too. I mean, from Chandrakirti's point of view, what was he really upset about? And if he was upset about this, then what are the consequences for the Cittamātra system? But then in the process, you lose the Cittamātra system, I think, the soteriological import, liberative import. So you see, for next time, since this is our, yeah, and there are other things in 54 to 83, but there are just a couple. And then there are other views on own character from 83, I said that was the next one, right? To 123. In order maybe to get through the assignment, I'm reading, that you may want to read more of the second one when you read the first one. It may help with the first one. And we'll go on and talk about the reasoning next time. And would you please look in,
Look at that quote.
yes, 518 in the first volume. There's the 4 lines, Minging aro lomeche, maweche, the mangeche, de dani damantang, dakte gelwe drubar gyur, which was the reasoning you were reading about for today. And just to see the Tibetan of Asangas, Summary of the Great Vehicle, when he's condensing into poetry his refutation.
I thought that might be useful to have some of those terms in Tibetan in the translation. You know, like Mangheva as non-restriction.
Yes, that's true. Because it takes years to find out that that's what it means. And he says, it's not certain. It's not ascertained.